Jerusalem. I have just arrived. Here I have jumped off the train before reaching downtown, and I am walking around and waiting for local transportation because I need to find some accommodation and don't necessarily want to stay in the city center. Israel is pretty pricey, especially hotels. A new high-speed train from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv is an excellent and cheap option to get to central Jerusalem in just over 20 minutes. Today's video is about Jerusalem, from the time before COVID popped up on the world stage. Currently, Israel is doing really good with vaccinating its people, but the country is still closed. No international visitors are allowed to come. So, if you visited Jerusalem, this could be a reminder what you saw there, or what you have missed, or what I have missed. If you haven't visited before, this could help you to plan a little for the times when the travel will be possible again. And I believe it will be. Or, if Israel is not in the cards for you, maybe you can just see something new and different. Either way, enjoy. Much of Jerusalem's importance rests upon a very special rock, which lies under this glittering dome, the Dome of the Rock. Seen as the holiest site for Jewish believers, parts of the four walls surrounding the Temple Mount date back to the time of the second Jewish temple, 1st century BCE. The Temple Mount is the third holiest site for Muslims after Mecca and Medina. In Muslim tradition, this is where the Prophet Muhammad made his night journey to the throne of God. In the 7th century, when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, they built the Dome of the Rock, the gold-topped Islamic shrine seen in many iconic photographs of the old city, as well as the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Did you know that Muslims used to pray facing Jerusalem? Well, I didn't, but now I do. In Islam, the sacred direction is toward Mecca, or more precisely, towards the sacred shrine of the Kaaba in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, toward which Muslims turn 5 times a day when performing the daily ritual prayer. Soon after Muhammad's migration to Medina in 622, he indicated Jerusalem as the direction was probably influenced by Jewish tradition. He later changed that direction to Mecca, and that's what's valid now for so many centuries already. The most famous Islamic landmark in Jerusalem, and also the oldest, is the Dome of the Rock. This site, however, is not a mosque, but rather a holy Muslim shrine. It is believed to be where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during his night journey. When visiting Jerusalem, many people want to see the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock. The Temple Mount is a holy site within the Old City for Jewish, Christian, and Muslim people. All visitors are able to tour the compound and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, with the exception of the Dome of the Rock. Muslims worshipped here for 1300 years. Its intricate geometric design in stone and tile fit within its pure and simple lines. While today this plaza around the Dome of the Rock functions as an expansive mosque for Muslims, Jews call this place Temple Mount. It was the site of the Jewish ancient temple complex, only the foundation of which survived. It is here that they believe Abraham was asked by God as test of his faith to sacrifice his son Isaac. Jews consider this spot the center of the earth, and they worshipped here for 3,000 years. 1,000 years before Christ, King David united the 12 tribes of Israel and captured Jerusalem. His son Solomon built the first temple right here. It was later destroyed and the second temple was built. And then came the catastrophic year for the Jews, 70 AD. That's when the Romans destroyed their temple and ushered in the diaspora. And that's when the Jews became a people without a land and dispersed throughout the world. For so many people, Jerusalem is the closest place on earth to heaven. Here, at the surviving bit of foundation called the Western Wall, Jews mourn a horrible past and pray for a better future. The square operates as an open-air synagogue, and men and women have each their own part of the wall. The access is free and 24 hours a day. The faithful believe prayers left in cracks between these ancient stones will be answered. It's a very public prayer with intense yet private worship. It is all mixed with happy commotion of Jewish families coming from around the world celebrating bar mitzvahs, the coming of age for Jewish boys. Today, more than 1 million prayer notes of wishes are placed in the Western Wall each year, pre-pandemic, of course. You can even mail or email your prayers to Jerusalem and someone will place them into the wall or a field. And now, I bet you have a burning question or two on your mind as I do. Who on earth reads those notes? And what happens with those notes? Is it like sending a letter to Santa Claus? Oh, no. So, I did a little investigation and the answer is no one reads them. It is a private and I suspect one-sided conversation between you and God. There is an old argument about whether to burn those notes or bury them, I was told. Jewish law states that it is forbidden to destroy holy texts. Instead, prayer books and scriptures are reposited in containers and often buried in Jewish cemeteries. But long before notes were stuck into the Western Wall, it was custom for religious Jews to place prayer notes at the graves of rabbis considered holy. Traditionally, these notes are burned. It is said burning is a pure way to deal with the note, but burying them, according to Jewish tradition, is more honorable. Twice a year, a rabbi and his assistants collect the notes left into the wall and bury them in the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives. The wall itself is an ancient limestone wall in the old city of Jerusalem. It is a relatively small segment of a far longer ancient retaining wall, known also in its entirety as the Western Wall. The wall was originally erected as a part of the expansion of the second Jewish temple that began by Herod the Great, and that resulted in the encasement of the natural steep hill known to Jews and Christians as the Temple Mount, and in one of several varying Muslim traditions, it is the site where the Islamic prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The Western Wall's holiness in Judaism is a result of its proximity to the Temple Mount. Herod built it and it surrounded the temple. The steps lead to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a church in the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. The church contains, according to traditions dating back to at least the 4th century, the two holiest sites in Christianity. The site where Jesus was crucified, the place known as Calvary or Golgotha, and Jesus' empty tomb where he was buried and resurrected. The status quo and understanding between religious communities dating to 1757 applies to the site. Each religious community guards its right jealously. The often uneasy relationship laid down by the status quo is typified by a wooden ladder resting on a cornice above the main entrance to the right and leaning against a window ledge. The ladder has been there for so long that nobody knows how it got there. Various suggestions have been offered. It was left behind by a careless mason or window cleaner. It had been used to supply food to Armenian monks locked in the church by the Turks. It had served to let the Armenians use the cornice as a balcony to get fresh air and sunshine, rather than leave the church and pay an Ottoman tax to re-enter it. So, I think I like this last theory the best. There was actually a period when the people were taxed if they or whenever they entered or left the church, so that would make sense. The monks or priests wanted to beat the system, so they didn't set foot outside of the church and other people were bringing them food. Right after you enter the church of the flag upon which is believed Jesus' dead body was laid, devotion and emotion have been stirred into this spot for nearly 2,000 years. It is a powerful experience to witness, regardless of your faith, to see pilgrims crying, touching and kissing the marble slab, and being emotional while being close to all the sides. Today, the dark, sprawling Church of Holy Sepulchre is the most sacred site in Christendom. While Emperor Constantine had the first church built here in the 4th century, most of today's church is the work of the 12th century Crusaders, built around the tomb or sepulchre of Jesus. And there are almost always crowds around the Edicula, the empty tomb of Jesus. People line up sometimes for hours to get inside for a few seconds. Monks keep people moving at a fast pace inside. Every year on Holy Saturday, the Greek Orthodox priests enter the Edicula with candles and emerge with lighted candles. The holy fire is a light set to miraculously emanate from what is traditionally believed to be the tomb of Christ on the day before Orthodox Easter. The light is said to grow strong enough to set candles aflame, and its appearance is one of the most sacred rituals of Eastern Orthodoxy. Not that I want to throw a shade on this event, but quite likely one of the priests brings in a lighter or matches inside, or people say the candles are laced with a chemical that causes a fire when exposed to air. By the way, Catholic Church does not participate and recognize this event. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built as separate constructs over the two holy sites, the Great Basilica, an enclosed atrium with traditional site of Calvary in one corner, and across a courtyard, a rotunda where Empress Mother Helena believed Jesus to have been buried. The church was consecrated on September 13, 335. Every year, the Eastern Orthodox Church celebrates the anniversary. Between the years 614 and 1009, the church was destroyed by fire, earthquake, fire, and completely destroyed in 1009 by a Muslim ruler. The rebuilding was finally completed at a huge expense by Emperor Constantine of Constantinople in 1048, even though Jerusalem was ruled by Muslims. The Crusades were a series of religious wars, initiated, supported, and sometimes directed by the Latin Church in the medieval period. The term refers specifically to the Eastern Mediterranean campaigns in the period between 1095 and 1271. But Muslim dominance eventually returned, and in the 16th century, the Ottoman Turks surrounded Jerusalem with this mighty wall. I decided to see a special event, opening of the church at 4 a.m. and also I wanted to avoid the crowd. Unfortunately, I have underestimated how long it would take me to get there. No public transport was really available at 3:30 a.m. So I just walked the empty streets of Jerusalem, and it took me longer than I expected. And I was late by 15 minutes. And what about the special event? So, the special event, that is daily opening of the church, and it's not just a plain vanilla unlocking of the door. It is quite an elaborate ritual that's been in practice for hundreds of years. But even though, so what you may think may not be necessarily what it is. Some priest comes, maybe Orthodox, maybe Catholic, and unlocks the door, right? But you would be wrong to think that. The key to the church and unlocking is being done by two Muslim families for hundreds of years. One Muslim family was entrusted with the keys centuries ago in an arrangement that dates back to the time of Saladin, the Muslim conqueror who seized the Holy City from the Crusaders in 1187. Meanwhile, another of the city's oldest Muslim families was entrusted with the duty of opening and closing the church doors, a task they perform to this day, with the large key, which is about 12 inches long and weighs half a pound. So that's something, isn't it? The rock of Calvary, where the crucifixion is believed to have occurred, is encased in glass at the lavish altar of the crucifixion. and it is the most visited area within the church. Whether it is the actual location, however, has been hotly debated. It cannot be determined. Members of the Christian church in Jerusalem fled about 66 AD, and Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. Wars, distractions, and confusion during the following centuries possibly prevented preservation of exact information. Actually, both the rock and the place where Jesus was buried were at the time outside of Jerusalem, yet close enough to be under one roof today and be part of Jerusalem proper. While the morning mass is in progress, I will tell you some more about the church. The Christian quarter surrounds the site of Jesus' crucifixion. A high point for visiting Christians is the Via Dolorosa, the route, it's believed, Jesus walked as he carried the cross. Pilgrims from around the world retrace his steps. The 14 stations of the cross remind the faithful of the Passion, the events that culminated in the crucifixion. 4 or 5 stations are located in the church, depending on whom you ask. The status quo and understanding between religious communities dating back to 1757 applies to the site. The main denominations sharing property over the parts of the church are the Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Armenian Apostolic, and to a lesser degree the Coptic Orthodox, Syriac Orthodox, and Ethiopian Orthodox. However, some of the sections of the church still remain hotly disputed to this day. Arguments and violent clashes are not uncommon. In November 2008, the internet was flooded with videos of a fist fight between Armenian and Greek monks in one such dispute. A small section of the roof of the church is disputed between the Copts and Ethiopians, and at least one Coptic monk at any given time sits there on a chair placed on a particular spot to express this claim. On a hot summer day, he moved his chair some 20 centimeters more into the shade. This was interpreted as a hostile act and violation of status quo. 11 were hospitalized after a fight resulting from this provocation. So how is this for Christian peacefulness? This building that we are looking at is believed by many to be a place where King David was buried. We are on Mount Zion just outside Jerusalem. Although the site of the tomb has long been in question, it is still a sacred site for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. David is an Old Testament hero, king of Israelites, credited with fighting Goliath, and was father to King Solomon. David's tomb stands in the ground level room of a Crusader-era building. On the second floor of the same building is the room of the Last Supper. The room holding the sarcophagus of David is used as a synagogue, while the upper room is visited by Christians in memory of Christ's Last Supper. The Crusaders built the present building, although 3 of the walls remain from an earlier synagogue church that was used by Roman and Byzantine-era Jewish Christians. There has been much discussion of the authentic old burial site of David. It was only in the 9th century that Muslims documented the present site of David's tomb, and in the 10th century pilgrims began visiting Mount Zion as the burial place of David. The Old Testament tells us that David was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. Archaeological excavations place the city of David south of Temple Mount and not on Mount Zion, where the present tomb stands and where we are right now. The city of David was the original settlement that grew into Jerusalem. The extensive excavations of the city of David have not uncovered an alternate tomb of David. Some have thought that David was buried in Bethlehem, a city also referred to as City of David. But excavations in Bethlehem have not unearthed his tomb. As I said, despite the fact that King David was probably not buried exactly at the present site of the tomb, it is still a revered landmark and pilgrimage site for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. This is David's supposed sarcophagus. Due to Israeli Jews being unable to reach holy sites in Jerusalem during the Jordanian annexation of the West Bank, the tomb of David was promoted as a place of worship. The building, built as a church, then transformed into a mosque, was split in two, and the ground floor with the tomb was converted into a synagogue immediately following the end of 47-49 Palestine War. From then onwards, the Israeli Ministry of Religious Affairs began the process of turning the site into Israeli primary religious site. From 1948 until the Six-Day War in 1967, it was considered the holiest Jewish site in Israel. The tomb compound includes the location traditionally identified as the cenacle or upper room, the original meeting place of the early Christian community of Jerusalem. Located on an upper floor of King David's tomb, the room of the Last Supper. According to the tradition, it was the place where the Last Supper took place. The word cenacle is derived from the Latin word for dining room, in memory of the festive Passover meal which Jesus shared with his apostles on the eve of his death. There isn't much to see in my opinion, but many visitors do come here. Jerusalem is a sprawling and modern city of about 800,000 people, but its historic core, the old city, home to around 35,000, that feels frozen in time, with possibly a little exception of the Jewish quarter. The old city, surrounded by its wall, is smaller than a square mile, and it is divided into 4 quarters: Jewish, Muslim, Armenian, and Christian. The old city is a labyrinth, rich with sights, sounds, smells, and experiences that reward the curious traveler. The Muslim quarter holds over half of the old city's population. You feel like you could be anywhere in the Arab world. While complete Muslim control of Jerusalem is unrealistic, many Arabs envision an independent Palestinian state with this part of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, as their capital. Israel, however, seems determined to keep Jerusalem whole and in its control. In fact, while walking through, you may see houses with Israeli flags. These are the homes of Jewish families who bought the property from its Arab owners in the Arab quarter. And from what I have heard, it is pretty dangerous for the sellers to sell to the Jews. Dangerous? How? Well, they face difficulties with the Arab community and are seen as traitors. And sometimes it doesn't stop just there. And here I am still in Jewish quarter, and the object, the glass object that you can see kind of in front, almost in the middle, is the golden menorah replica. It's on display here. It is the menorah intended for use in a planned third temple to be built. Now it is on this square in the Jewish quarter. The quarter, Jewish quarter, is more orderly and modern than the other three quarters. Much of this area was destroyed during fighting in 1948 or under the period of Jordanian occupation. After they took control of Jerusalem in 1967, the Israelis rebuilt and reconstructed this quarter. Because it was basically destroyed, it allowed archaeologists to make many new discoveries before the rebuilding began. One of them was an ancient Romanian main street behind this building in front of us. While it's not convenient or economical to live in this medieval quarter, devout Jews like to live and raise their families so close to the western wall here. About 3/4 of all Israelis are Jewish, but most of these are secular Jews, non-practicing. About 15% of Israeli Jews are Orthodox, very religious and living conservative lifestyle that require them to be apart in many ways. And about 20% of the population is Arab Israelis, generally Muslim Palestinians who never left after the formation of Israel. Christians, who are mostly Arabs, make up a very small and shrinking minority. The way people dress can give a clue about their religious affiliation. This is especially evident at places of worship and in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods. For example, what does the block on the forehead indicate? Well, in the scripture it says you should always have the love of God on your mind. So in that capsule they have a parchment with that scripture. And the significance of yarmulke: Jews wear yarmulkes because they are constantly reminding themselves that God is above them. And what about the earlocks? The Torah is very specific. Thou shalt not shave the sides of your face. And these people take those words as written. Another thing, dominant color amongst men is black because they are still mourning the destruction of the temple and of Israel. So yeah, if you kind of pay attention, you can figure out a lot of things just by observing. And here you can see basically a lot of tourists, but also some people who live in the Jewish quarter. So it's kind of interesting to sit down and just watch the world go by. And here I got into a synagogue in the old Jewish quarter, the one that was rebuilt, and got to the highest level possible just to see how it looks inside. And it does seem that it's an Orthodox flavor of the religion, and the man below, it's only men, are studying Torah and praying. And this is kind of early morning in the Armenian quarter. I just stopped by there in a little shop to have my morning coffee and to make some plans where I will go next. So after a while I got up to stretch my legs and look at what's on those signs on the wall on the left, and then I will just finish my coffee, my breakfast, and continue exploring the old quarters. As my short stay in Jerusalem comes to an end, let me share some thoughts with you before I sign off. Before you come to Israel, do some little research so you are not surprised too much when you come. The country in general is quite pricey, especially accommodation. I paid well over $100 for really so little tiny room. I felt almost like in Japan. It was so small. The food depends on where you eat. You can find reasonably priced food in small shops, stores on the main streets, or not even only on the main streets, where you can eat pretty good food, reasonably priced. If you go to a sit-down restaurant and want a waiter wait on you, bring you food and so on, you will pay for the pretty penny. But food is really good, and I like Jerusalem bakeries, both Arabic and Jewish. Very good baked food, and I think you will not be hungry there, even if you are on a budget. Transport is reliable, reasonably priced, clean, no complaints there. And don't forget, while in Tel Aviv all the stores are open during Shabbat, in Jerusalem it's quite the opposite. Most of the stores are closed. And remember, the weekend, Shabbat, the rest is from sundown on Friday until sundown on Saturday. And Sunday is a normal working day. So that's about it, and enjoy traveling. So one last walk, look around, and time to say goodbye to Jerusalem. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumb up or down, and see you next time. Bye bye now. Of course, there are a lot of things to see in Jerusalem proper, but there are tons of things to see outside of Jerusalem or outside of Tel Aviv as well. There are lots and lots of travel agencies that can take you where you want to go, or you can rent a car. The road signs, street signs are in Hebrew, in Arabic, and in English most of the time, so there is no problem with driving on your own.